Did you know that one of the most powerful men in the world once vanished into thin air? Well, he actually didn't. He was just really drunk. Welcome to my channel. Today, we're going to meet the Canadian Prime Minister who disappeared on holiday. Mackenzie King was born on December 17, 1874. His father died when Mackenzie was only 10 years old, leaving his mother Elizabeth to raise him and his 4 siblings alone. Little Mackenzie had always wanted to be a politician, but his mother desperately didn't want any of her children to go into politics. She believed it was a life of corruption and scandal and told Mackenzie if he ever ran for office, she would disallow him from ever entering their home again. Sadly, Mackenzie took his mother's words to heart and never told her that he'd become Prime Minister of Canada. But before we get into that, take a moment to like this video. It really helps us grow. Thanks for doing that. Now back to the story. After studying political science at the University of Toronto, Mackenzie King became a civil servant, working for the federal government in various departments. By 1919, he'd become Prime Minister of Canada. While he was admired by many, it wasn't long before rumors began circulating about his heavy drinking. Rumors also started to spread about his strange behavior, especially around his mother's home, where he would stay every summer. One time, he was so drunk that he fell out of a window and broke his collarbone. Another time, he got stuck in a bathroom because he drank too much and couldn't pull his pants up. After stumbling out of the bathroom, he then proceeded to fall up the stairs. In 1921, Mackenzie King went to Europe for a vacation. While there, he visited the famous French resort town of Cap d'Agde, where he rented a villa called Villa Lagaret. He intended to stay for 2 months, but after a few weeks, he began having terrifying visions that made him think he needed to leave immediately. Mackenzie told his friends that he was seeing ghosts all over the house, including the ghost of an old woman who appeared at the foot of his bed each night. Of course, no one believed him. Everyone thought Mackenzie was simply getting drunk and seeing things that weren't there. As the weeks passed, Mackenzie's fear grew, and he decided that he needed to leave the villa immediately. He didn't even bother to pack his things and instead rushed to the train station, where he boarded a train to Paris. There he checked himself into a hotel room, locked the door, and ordered his food to be brought up to him. Mackenzie spent a week in the room drinking heavily and not coming out except to use the bathroom. His friends and family were worried sick, and some even traveled to Paris to try to convince him to return home. But Mackenzie refused to leave until the ghosts were gone. It was actually 3 days after his friends arrived that Mackenzie finally came out of his room. He explained that he'd been busy writing down the messages the ghosts had been trying to tell him and that he wasn't ready to go home yet because he had to finish writing them down. Once Mackenzie finished writing, he returned to Canada and continued to act like the Prime Minister despite everyone telling him that he was unfit to work. In fact, he worked so much that he didn't have time to read over his notes from the ghosts. Years later, after Mackenzie retired from politics, he finally began reading through his notes and discovered something horrifying. The ghosts hadn't been trying to tell him anything. They'd actually been trying to warn him about his heavy drinking and the terrible shape his health was in. Mackenzie had been too drunk to realize this at the time and had ignored their warnings, which eventually led to his death from a stroke in 1958. Now it's time for you to make your voice heard. Comment below. Do you believe in ghosts? If so, have you ever seen one? And if you haven't, what about creepy vacation experiences? I'm really curious to read your comments. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you next time. Bye.